grammar school. He became a cashier, a bookkeeper, and later a sales clerk. Brooke learned from the ground up, which was the way his father wanted it. "My father had taken me into the business in the same way," Alex Hart later told reporters, "and we had looked forward to the day when Brooke would take an active part in the conduct of the store." By the time Brooke became a teenager, he probably knew more about Hart's, which by then employed over 200 people, than anyone in the company. Hart's continued to do well, even in hard economic times. The Hart family built a stunning home in the city of San Jose, one of the most lavish in the county. The Victorian-style mansion, with its two-story white columns, sat high up on a hill and was surrounded by lush, extravagant gardens. Its lawns were impeccably groomed, and people frequently passed by its iron gates in the summer just to admire its palatial grounds. Brooke entered Santa Clara University in 1929, where he excelled as a student and in sports, particularly tennis. Just 18 years old, Brooke was a handsome young man. He stood almost 6 feet tall, with the trim build of an athlete. His wavy blonde hair and blue eyes made him especially attractive to the single girls of San Jose, and he was considered the city's most desirable bachelor. Brooke had a friendly, mischievous personality and was well liked. Since Brooke worked in his father's store practically his entire life, just about every citizen in San Jose knew him. That was because just about every one of San Jose's 60,000 citizens shopped at Hart's. Brooke was a familiar sight in the city's streets that year. He had bought a brand new green 1933 Studebaker Roadster, and the speedy car was the envy of many young men in San Jose. On the evening of November 9, 1933, Alex J. Hart was due to attend a dinner meeting with Chamber of Commerce friends at a San Jose country club. The function was set for about 6 p.m. Alex made plans for Brooke to leave work early, walk over to a nearby garage, get the car, and then drive him to the club, which was only a short distance away. This was a happy time for both father and son, since Brooke was given a promotion only a month before. "It was a high moment in my life when I took Brooke into the department store recently as vice president," Senior Hart later said to the press. At 5:55 p.m., Brooke told his father he would be right back and walked out onto Market Street toward the lot where his Studebaker was parked. It was the last moment Alex Hart would ever see his son alive. John Jack Holmes was born in Los Angeles on March 20, 1904. When he was 11, his family moved to San Jose, where John's father opened a tailor shop in downtown San Jose. He worked hard and soon became a proud member of the city's business community. San Jose, resting in the southern peninsula of Santa Clara Valley, was considered a smaller version of the larger and more exciting San Francisco to the north. Roads that went through or passed near San Jose were, at that time, the only land access routes to the San Francisco area. The famous Golden Gate Bridge was not yet built, though by the winter of 1933, construction was well underway. San Jose was the kind of place where most people knew everybody else in the city. As a teenager, Jack attended San Jose High School, where he excelled as a football star. He was a big boy, over 6 feet tall, and knew how to take care of himself. After an argument with a teacher, Jack was kicked out of school. However, he was somewhat ambitious and immediately got a job in an electronics store. By the time he was 20, Jack had married a local girl and settled down to married life. Jack Holmes had an outgoing personality and made friends easily. By 1928, he had 2 children and moved to a place called Half Moon Bay, a deserted village on the Pacific side of San Mateo County. He worked in a local gas station where local toughs and petty criminals frequently stopped by and chatted with the gregarious attendant. Holmes became fascinated with outlaws and what he saw as their exciting lives. He frequently mused over dreams of committing the perfect crime. In Henry Farrell's book, Swift Justice, the author said, he would pore over the newspapers, analyzing the crimes reported and the errors that led to the perpetrator's detection. In his mind, Holmes must have thought he could commit crimes that would make him lots of money and not get caught. But during this time, Holmes kept these thoughts to himself. He was never arrested or charged with any crime. In 1932, while Holmes worked as a salesman for an oil company, he made a scheduled stop at a San Jose gas station. The attendant at that time was a man named Thomas Harold Thurmond. The 2 men quickly became friends. Though they were different in personality and temperament, they shared a common bond. They liked money. Harold was born on a farm in 1906 and moved to San Jose with his family when he was 11 years old. He later dropped out of high school and worked in a series of low-paying jobs in and around San Jose. The Thurmond family was well known, and all of Harold's 5 sisters either married well or obtained good jobs. Harold was the exception in the family and was considered somewhat of a disappointment. Though he frequently hung around with San Jose's criminal element, like Holmes, he had never been arrested. But together, Thurmond and Holmes decided to try to make some fast money. Using Holmes's inside information on the oil company, they planned the abduction of a courier who worked for the Union Oil Company. On September 25, 1933, they kidnapped and robbed the employee. The victim was released unharmed, and the 2 men split $716, which was a large sum of money during the Depression era. Barely 1 month later, on October 23rd, Thurmond and Holmes robbed a Shell Oil Company messenger and made off with $700. Again, the victim was not hurt, but Holmes had temporarily fulfilled one of his fantasies. He had gotten away with the perfect crime, twice. It was time to move on to bigger and better things. After waiting 30 minutes for his son to return, Alex Hart grew very nervous. He knew that if the car broke down or it had a flat tire, Brooke would have simply walked back to the store to let his father know the trouble. Furthermore, Alex also was aware that Brooke had another appointment to make at 6:30. He would never leave his father standing in front of the store without notifying him he would be delayed. Assuming that Brooke had some other pressing business, Alex Hart left the store and got a ride to the meeting. Afterward, when he discovered that Brooke had never arrived home, Alex Hart notified the police that his son had disappeared. For the next few hours, the family's concern grew as it became apparent that no one, not even his closest friends, knew where Brooke was. At about 9:45 that evening, the phone rang at the Harts' residence. Brooke's sister, Elise, 18, took the call. A man told her that Brooke had been taken and was being held for ransom. The caller demanded $40,000 in cash. He said that further instructions would follow. If the police were notified, he added, Brooke would be killed. Alex Hart called San Jose Police Chief John Black. He notified San Francisco of the kidnapping and put out an all-points bulletin for Brooke's green 1932 Studebaker Roadster. The FBI, then known as the Department of Justice, installed phone recording devices in the Hart home and notified the phone company to be ready to trace future phone calls. An agent was also placed inside the residence to monitor developments. Later that same night, an employee of Hart's found Brooke's Studebaker abandoned in the hills north of San Jose. The lights were on, but there was no sign of Brooke. On Saturday, November 11th, after nearly 2 days of waiting, the Harts went public and made an appeal through the newspapers. Worn by hours of anxiety but calm, the San Francisco Chronicle reported, Alexander J. Hart today granted his first interview regarding the disappearance of his son. He described Brooke as a fine young man and said he never had any trouble with him. Brooke is of exceptional character, he told reporters. We have been wonderful pals. Why, many times the boy offered to take me to the football games instead of going with young friends. Later that same day, Brooke's wallet was found on the railing of a ship that had been in San Francisco Bay refueling the Lurline, an ocean cruiser headed for Mexico. Speculation grew that Brooke was being held captive on board. Alameda County Police and FBI agents hopped a plane flight to Los Angeles, where the Lurline was due to arrive at its last stop in the States. In L.A., police took a fast skiff 10 miles offshore and met the ship. While several hundred passengers had to stand by, a stem-to-stern search was conducted. Baseball legend Babe Ruth was one of the passengers, on his way to a college football game. After hours of searching every nook and cranny of the huge ocean liner, no trace of Brooke was found. Hunt for Hart fails on liner, no new clues, said the San Francisco Chronicle. The weekend passed with no word about the fate of Brooke Hart. On Monday afternoon, Alex Hart received a letter which was postmarked in Sacramento on November 11th. It was a note from the kidnappers. According to the FBI report, it read, "One more peep to police will be his finish," it said. "You have made one squawk, another will be too bad. We will have $40,000. Put it in a satchel, black. Be ready to take a week's trip on an hour's notice. Get the stewed roadster, have radio installed. When told to go, you will take orders from RPO, a local radio station. You better do as told. On November 15th, after the Harts had received several other false contacts from people who tried to extort money from the family, a second letter from the kidnappers was received. In this long and detailed communication, Alex Hart was ordered to take the $40,000 in cash and drive alone in the Studebaker toward Los Angeles. If he agreed to this arrangement, the numeral 2 was to be written on a large sign and placed in a window in Hart's department store. Alex Hart was willing to comply, but unfortunately, he had never learned how to drive a car. The sign was placed in the window with an additional note. Accordingly, the FBI report said, the numeral 2 was placed in the window, but in view of the fact that Mr. Hart could not drive a car, in large black letters were printed the words, "I cannot drive." By early evening, the kidnappers had gotten the message because at 8 p.m., the phone at the Hart residence rang. It was someone who claimed to be holding Brooke captive. The FBI agent in the home listened in on the call while the phone operator began to relay the caller's location to the police on another line. The FBI report on the phone call recited the conversation. "Is this Mr. Hart?" "Yes," he replied. "Mr. Hart, you had our serial number in the window this afternoon." "Yes, it was there. I can't drive." "Mr. Hart, you get some member of your family and leave PDQ." "I can't drive, and I'm in no physical condition to make a trip." "Mr. Hart, I want your answer," the voice insisted. "Yes or no, will you go?" "I'm willing to deal with you," Hart pleaded, "to do anything in my power to get my boy back, but I'm unable to leave now." The man insisted that the switch had to be made now. Hart would have to find someone to drive the car, but the money had to be paid tonight. While the conversation continued, police were notified that the call was being made from a payphone at a garage on South Market Street in downtown San Jose. Within seconds, a dozen cops, including Santa Clara County Police Chief William J. Emig, were speeding toward the location. In the meantime, Alex Hart stonewalled the man on the phone. "I want to deal with you," he assured the caller. "To be fair, but I can't go. I'm ill. Can't we get somebody that will be satisfactory to you as a go-between?" "Well, who would we get?" the caller asked. "I don't know, somebody you name, or I can name somebody." "Mr. Hart, I've got orders from headquarters." The voice turned angry. "And this is the last time. This is your last chance. That's all I can say. Will you go or not? If you don't go now, it will be just too bad." "No, I won't go. I haven't any assurance that you have the boy. Can't you give me any assurance?" "We have your boy. Will you leave now?" The caller was getting angrier by the minute, but Alex Hart dragged out the conversation as long as he could. "Well, where should I go? When?" he said. "Follow the instructions of that letter this afternoon. Leave for Los Angeles in the car. Your boy will be returned." "How do I know I'll get my boy, or where?" Just then, the police pulled up outside the plaza garage. They saw a man talking on the phone with his back facing them. He never noticed the gang of very excited police officers until they were almost on top of him. As they opened the door to the booth, the caller hung up. When he turned around, he was face to face with Chief Emig. "What's your name?" the chief shouted. "Harold Thurmond," the frightened man replied. Thurmond was taken over to the San Jose jail where he was questioned by police and FBI agents. At first, he denied any involvement in the kidnapping and said he was on the phone with a friend whose name he couldn't remember. Then he changed his story and said he was talking to his mother. But FBI agents would not relent, and soon Thurmond gave in. This subject was thoroughly questioned from 8 o'clock Wednesday night, November 15, 1933, the FBI reports read, until about 2:30 a.m. He finally admitted that he had been mixed up in this scheme to kidnap Brooke Hart and outlined briefly that he and Jack Holmes had kidnapped Hart and driven him up to the San Mateo Bridge where they had bound him up and tossed the victim into the San Francisco Bay. Thurmond gave a detailed description of the crime, and police learned for the first time that Brooke had been killed within an hour after the abduction at the parking garage. As Brooke got into his car, Holmes, armed with a handgun, was already waiting for him by the exit gate. When Brooke slowed for the exit, Holmes jumped in the Studebaker and plunged the gun into the young man's side. "I was parked in Jack Holmes's Chevrolet coach on Market Street," Thurmond told police, and I saw Jack Holmes drive by in Brookhart's Studebaker Roadster, and according to directions, I followed that car. About 10 miles from San Jose, in a town called Milpitas, they pushed Hart into the back of the Chevy and drove to the San Mateo Bridge. Brookhart was ordered out of the car, Thurman said. Jack Holmes walked back of the car and hit him over the head with a brick I had obtained in San Jose before we started. Hart hollered, "Help! Help!" But Jack Holmes hit him over the head again with the brick and knocked Brookhart unconscious. And then I took some baling wire and bound his arms around his body and his abdomen. Jack Holmes then took hold of the upper part of Brookhart's body, and I took hold of him from his knees down, and together we lifted him onto the railing of the San Mateo Bridge and tossed him into the bay. He struggled slightly. Thurman continued on, detailing all the letters and phone calls he and Holmes had made to the Hart family. He also told police that Holmes was staying at the California Hotel right in San Jose, and as far as he knew, Holmes was there right at the California Hotel right in San Jose, and as far as he knew, Holmes was there right now. FBI agents and police then took Thurman to the hotel. It was nearly 4 a.m. on Thursday morning. The agents had Thurman knock on the door several times. After a minute or two, a voice was heard behind the door. "Who is it?" "It's me, Harold," replied Thurman. Police heard the door being unbolted, and as soon as it opened, they rushed in. Jack Holmes, still in his underwear, was pounded to the floor and taken into custody. Sheriff Emig was concerned about the mood of people in San Jose. The abduction of young Brooke had angered the entire county. The Harts were one of the most respected and well-known families in the area. They employed hundreds of citizens in their business, and just about everyone had met a Hart family member at one time or another. Because of his concern, Sheriff Emig and the FBI took Holmes to San Francisco, where the interrogation continued. At first, Holmes denied being part of the scheme and said that he had never called the Hart family. But agents soon convinced Holmes that he had to cooperate since the truth was already known. I, John Maurice Holmes, in the presence of Sheriff Emig of Santa Clara County Police, make this statement voluntarily. The FBI report begins. Holmes recited his involvement in the crime and told police how he planned the abduction with Harold Thurman. He said that he observed Brooke on several occasions prior to November 9th and thought it would be better to snatch the young man when he could be found alone. From the very beginning, Holmes said, he could not think of a place to hold Brooke while negotiations went on. "You know, the smart thing is to dump that guy overboard someplace," Holmes said to Thurman before the kidnapping. Later, when they had Brooke on the San Mateo Bridge, Holmes said he knocked the victim to the ground. Then Harold got the wire and started wrapping his feet and hands. I hit him pretty hard. I wanted him to know that we meant business. Harold got the 2 concrete blocks and tied them around his feet, and we tossed him overboard. Holmes's statement added one important detail. He said that after they dumped Brooke into the bay, he managed to free himself from the wire. When they saw the young man thrashing about in the water, yelling for help, they decided to act. Harold took the gun and climbed down on the stringers and fired the cartridges that were in the pistol. Holmes told police that Harold fired several shots at Hart until the noise stopped and all was quiet. Then, Holmes said, he drove home where he met his wife and took her to the local picture show. According to author Harry Farrell, author of Swift Justice, the movie showing that night was Disney's The Three Little Pigs. Soon, the details of Holmes' confession were public. Rumors of additional crimes committed by the suspect soon circulated throughout the county. The next day, a San Jose newspaper published an editorial titled Human Devils. In it, the suggestion of what should be done with the suspects was made very clear. According to Farrell, the editorial said, "If mob violence could ever be justified, it would be in a case like this, and we believe the general public will agree with us," the editorial said. "If you could have been with the writer who called at the Hart home to offer our sympathy, it would have made you feel like going out and committing a lynching yourself." "Hart boy slain," kidnapper says, said the Washington Times. "Concrete blocks used in Hart murder" was the headline in the Washington News on November 17th. "Let justice be swift," said one San Francisco newspaper. "Seek noose for Hart killers," said another. Everywhere, but especially in the Southern California area, the media offered a nonstop barrage of sensational headlines that kept the public on the edge of their seats. Nowhere were the passions as high as in Santa Clara and Alameda counties. Federal agents continued to question the subjects throughout the night. The sheriff and his deputy and the chief of police being merely onlookers, said one FBI report of the interrogation. It was later decided that both suspects undergo psychological tests to ascertain their mental state and prepare for a possible insanity defense. Dr. Frederick Prusher, chief pathologist from the county hospital, supervised the exam. But when he tried to interview Thurmond in his cell about his actions during the kidnapping, he refused to cooperate. "My brother told me not to talk," he said. "I'd rather not say anything about it." Prusher later issued a report that both men were normal and displayed no signs of mental defects. The prisoners were transported back to San Jose and remanded to the county jail on Market Street. In the meantime, the Hart family was trying to accept the possibility that Brooke was probably dead. They consented to an interview with the San Francisco Chronicle in which Alex Hart talked about his grief. "My boy is gone," he told the press. "Neither words nor actions either can bring him back. Mrs. Hart is well. She is as well as can be expected, but she is confined to her room under the care of physicians and nurses." Miriam and Elise, Brooke's sisters, were taking the news hard and declined to be seen in public. "They are well and very brave," Alex Hart said. "They are a great comfort to us during this difficult period." As he spoke, Hart walked among his flower gardens while the press followed behind him. "Everyone has been so kind," he continued, "and there is not a single member of this family who is not deeply appreciative of the consideration we have received." On November 13th, a police search party turned up a white pillowcase floating in the waters off the Alameda County coastline. The item was brought to Sheriff Emmig's office for further examination. It was known that one of Brooke Hart's close friends, child actor Jackie Coogan, had lost a similar pillowcase while he and Brooke were at a football game. Speculation was that it somehow wound up in Brooke's car and was tossed into the bay by the kidnappers. Coogan was called in to view the item but denied it belonged to him. Word circulated around town that prior to dumping Brooke Hart into the sea, his kidnappers had placed a pillowcase over his head. To the public, it was very much like an execution. Police divers continued their search for Brooke Hart in the murky waters of San Francisco Bay. As they scoured the bottom of the channel near the San Mateo Bridge, other officers used grappling hooks from rowboats to drag the muddy flats for possible remains. Almost 2 weeks had passed since the day of the kidnapping, and if the confessions were reliable, Hart would have been in the water since November 9th. At the lower portion of the bridge, police found evidence that Hart was still alive when he was thrown into the water and may have even tried to climb the steel columns. A ring of broken and clawed barnacles on one of the piles high above the waterline. The San Francisco Chronicle reported, showed where the boy had clung, desperately hurt, in a frantic battle of youth against death, weakened by the loss of blood and possible wounds inflicted by his 2 confessed murderers. His cries lessened as he slipped into the dark waters. Though Hart was a strong swimmer, it was doubtful if he could have held on for long after being hit with a rock and perhaps several gunshots. Divers at the bridge location retrieved a quantity of baling wire and several concrete blocks. Strands of blonde hair were plainly visible on a section of the wire. Police became revitalized by the discovery. Following the tide tables of November 9th and 10, and making an educated guess, they concentrated their search on the western side of the bay and along the rocky shoreline. Investigators knew that in the past, bodies drifted from the bridge area onto the mudflats of the Alameda shore. On the morning of November 26th, 2 Redwood City residents, who were hunting for ducks, noticed a small bundle floating in the water less than 1 mile south of the San Mateo Bridge. When they saw it was a corpse, they pulled it on board and notified the coroner's office in Alameda County. The body was decomposed and severely damaged by crabs and eels. The face and hair had been eaten away, and the hands and feet were destroyed. Dr. Prusher, who performed the post-mortem examination, told the press, "The remains were hardly recognizable. The abdomen had been entirely removed, and practically all of the upper portion of the body was missing. However, the clothes were still mostly intact. There was also a gold clasp inserted into the shirt's collar. The arrow shirt and the pants were the same kind carried by the Hart's department store." One of Hart's closest friends, Charles O'Brien, was summoned to the coroner's office. After careful consideration, he was able to positively identify the remains as that of Brooke Hart. Only a few hours after Brooke Hart was found, someone threw a rock at the front door of the county jail in downtown San Jose. Sensing a wave of rising public anger over the Hart case and the possibility that Thurmond and Holmes may get off with an insanity plea, a San Francisco newspaper published an editorial on November 17th, urging the death penalty to the accused. Officers of the Department of Justice, FBI, have struck swiftly and decisively, the article said. They have put the fear of the law into the hearts of other criminals, whose warped and degenerate minds may have been planning other similar atrocities. As for the guilty, the facts of the case call for swift punishment. Death. No two men will ever mount the scaffold with less sympathy. Threats of lynching and vigilante justice were everywhere. At Santa Clara University, rumors were rampant that a group of Brooke's friends were planning an assault on the jail. The sheriff's office was aware of the highly emotional state of San Jose's citizens and knew that there was a strong possibility of violence. The lurid details of the killing had been published in the newspapers ever since November 16th, the day of Holmes's arrest. His statement, that he and Thurmond had tied up Brooke and thrown him into the bay, had inflamed the public. When it was revealed that they also shot at Brooke while he thrashed around in the dark waters, people were livid. In San Jose, the news of the discovery of the body spread like an epidemic. Hundreds of phone calls asking for confirmation were made to the police and local newspapers. Crowds gathered at the sheriff's office where police had moved in large trucks and barricades. The jailhouse doors were locked and secured. Behind them, heavy weapons were handed out to deputies with warnings that a mob was gathering outside. The FBI, however, made an inquiry at the jail and was told there was no immediate threat. According to a memo written a few days earlier by Agent V.W. Hughes to Director Hoover, he was assured that an assault on the county jail was not imminent. Mr. Vetterli stated that contrary to the newspaper observation, there was no crowd outside. There was no indication or evidence of any possible violence. But by Friday night, November 26th, the mood had changed. The outrage over the killing of Brooke Hart was brewing like a hurricane in Santa Clara County. By 6 p.m. on November 26th, hundreds of men had gathered by the county jail in San Jose. They milled around the entrance and out back of the building on First Street. A few burning torches were lit and placed in trash barrels along Market Street, and the sound of angry voices was heard on every city corner. Rumors of an insanity verdict were very strong, and the possibility that the suspects would somehow escape justice incited the restless crowd. Every few minutes someone would throw a bottle or a rock at the entrance to the jail. Inside, Sheriff Emig had reinforced the doors that led outside by bracing wooden 2x4s against its handles. Police turned off the inside lights on the first floor so as not to give a clear target. "Give them to us," one man yelled. Sheriff Emig watched the men from the jail window. As soon as the crowd saw him, they reacted. "Give them up, Sheriff," another demanded. "We'll take care of them." More people began to assemble along Market Street and around the corner in front of the Hall of Records. Several cars were parked at St. John's Street and St. James Street, blocking access for regular traffic. Nervous deputies waited anxiously behind the iron doors of the jail. Through the bars on the windows, they saw familiar faces of neighbors and friends in the mob. Inside their cells, Thurmond and Holmes paced back and forth like caged animals. "It doesn't look good," Holmes said to one of the deputies. At about 8 p.m., one of the trapped deputies, apparently acting on his own, fired a tear gas shell into the crowd on Market Street. Hundreds of people scattered and ran into the adjoining alleys, but the mob became enraged. They threw rocks and bricks into the windows of the jailhouse, shattering glass and debris all over the sidewalk. They began to strip tiles off the nearby post office building and tossed them at the parked police cars. Police fired an additional volley of tear gas into the alley below, sending people running for cover. Across the street, over 1,000 citizens had gathered in St. James Park. More could be seen headed toward the park, where torches were ignited and shouts of defiance could be heard. "Turn them over! Hang the bastards!" they yelled. By 9 p.m., the mob had grown to over 5,000, most of whom milled around St. James Park, making noise, lighting fires, and on occasion tossing pieces of iron pipe, bottles, and bricks toward the jail. Telephone wires had been destroyed, so police had no way to call for reinforcements. Sheriff Emig ordered his men to take all weapons and hide them on the third floor. If the mob succeeded in getting inside the jail, he did not want more bloodshed. "We had enough guns to kill 1,000 people," the sheriff later told the local press, "but we didn't want to do it." At about 10 p.m., a messenger brought news to the sheriff that they were coming into the jail at 11 and that police should not interfere. By 11 p.m., the temper of the mob was near hysteria. Sheriff Emig knew that he and his few deputies stood virtually no chance of repelling an assault. He ordered his men to do what they could, but not to use any firearms. Wooden barricades that were placed in front of the building were broken down and thrown at the jail. In the alleyway facing the courthouse, another hostile crowd had gathered. They tossed an assortment of debris at the side windows where police ducked for cover under desks and in closets. Directly opposite the jail, where a post office was under construction, dozens of angry men tore down a length of heavy steel pipe. Using it as a battering ram, the men pounded on the front doors of the jail. "Let's go, boys," one man shouted. "Turn them over to the sheriff." Within minutes, a second gang of about 20 men grabbed another length of 8-inch pipe and used it as a second ram. Upstairs, police fired a round of tear gas, which sent some of the crowd away, but could not stop the assault on the front doors. In less than 5 minutes, the old steel doors caved in and crashed to the floor. Hundreds rushed into the jail. One local youth, Anthony Cataldi, 17, later told reporters, "I was the first one of the gang to break into the jail." Vicious fights broke out between the hopelessly outnumbered cops and the furious mob. Sheriff Emig was trampled to the floor and suffered a skull fracture. The other deputies were quickly overcome and tossed aside. In one solid mass, the excited horde charged up to the second floor, where Thurmond and Holmes cowered in their cells, paralyzed with fear. The jailkeeper was knocked unconscious, and his keys were ripped from his leather belt. The frenzied men quickly located the prisoners and dragged them from their cells, kicking and screaming. Holmes was a big man, over 6 feet tall and in good shape. He put up a vicious fight, knocking several of the assailants to the ground. With wild whoops, which drew thousands of onlookers homeward bound from nearby theaters, the mob raced with their prisoners to St. James Park, is how one newspaper described the scene. At first, they grabbed the wrong prisoner, leaving Thurmond in his cell. The man screamed for his life that he was not one of Hart's killers. When they realized their mistake, the mob threw him down the steps of the jail and returned to get Thurmond. Their cries for mercy were lost in the angry roar of the crowd, said the Chronicle the next day. Though he tried to fight, Thurmond was beaten senseless and apparently not aware of anything after he was taken from the cell. In the meantime, the throng at St. James Park had grown to thousands of people. Some estimates put the size at over 10,000 citizens. Burning torches lit up the grounds as Thurmond and Holmes were dragged feet first into the park. People kicked the prisoners, hit them with tree branches, and threw bricks at the helpless men as they passed by. "How do you like it?" they yelled. "Murderers! Killers!" they screamed. The more Holmes fought, the more the crowd retaliated against him. He managed to knock several of his tormentors to the ground, but suffered terrible injuries along the way. By then, the mob was in a fury. They dragged the prisoners to the northern corner of the park. A youth quickly scurried up a tall elm tree with a length of rope and tossed it over a large branch about 20 feet from the ground. "I went out to my father's ranch and got some rope for the hanging," he later told reporters. The other end was fastened into a noose and pulled over Holmes' head. He managed to get it off his neck, but several men quickly beat him into submission. A few yards away, a noose was placed around Thurmond's neck without a problem. He had never regained consciousness since he was taken from his cell. Then several men hoisted Thurmond up 10 feet off the ground. Meanwhile, Holmes continued to resist until the mob broke both his arms. Then he was stripped naked and the rope firmly knotted around his neck. He was lifted up while he kicked frantically into the air. Thousands cheered when they saw the kidnappers hanging from the tree limbs. Some applauded. Illuminated by car headlights and dozens of flashlights, the two men dangled from the trees. A few women fainted. Some of the lynchers held burning matches under Holmes's feet while others shouted their approval. A sock caught fire and burned for several minutes as spectators yelled, "Burn! Burn!" Motorists who were passing by were drawn to the scene by the yelling and cheering. They parked their cars along First Street and wandered in to investigate the commotion. At the height of the lynching, over 10,000 people were inside St. James Park. Only a few brave souls had tried to stop it. The New York Times later reported, police and officers who had been on guard kept carefully away from the park, watching the action of the mob from the opposite side of the wide street. Press people from the local newspapers snapped dozens of photographs and easily recognized many of their neighbors. For hours afterward, people roamed through the park and children played nearby while the naked bodies of Thurmond and Holmes swayed in the gentle night breeze. A telegram sent by an FBI agent to Washington, D.C. on November 27th reported the events at St. James Park to the Home Office. It read, Hart kidnapping subjects Thurmond and Holmes under state custody in San Jose were taken by the mob and lynched midnight tonight. The front page of the New York Times on November 27, 1933 read, Batter down jail door. Leaders at San Jose seize 2 kidnappers, string them to trees. The Washington Post said, Here is the story of 5,000 persons who went mad. Only an army could have stopped Double Hang. Across the nation, newspapers reported on the lynching in San Jose, calling the mob crazy, bloodthirsty, and savage. Many reflected on how such a thing could happen in a quiet, civilized town like San Jose. Oakland's Post-Inquirer called it vigilante justice for Brooke Hart slayers, while the Washington News said, lynchings inspire fear of God. In San Jose, most people were satisfied that the kidnappers got what was coming to them, though not all agreed with the method used. St. James Park was a shambles, and curiosity seekers still roamed about, looking for souvenirs from the lynching. Many people cut off pieces of the trees where Thurmond and Holmes met their end. City employees were forced to construct wooden boxes around the trees to prevent them from being cut to pieces. It was an outburst characterized by hysteria and ribaldry, said the New York Times, with a frenzied rush for souvenirs after the naked bodies of the slayers were cut down. Dozens of heavily armed police patrolled around the park while authorities surveyed the damage to the jailhouse. Sheriff William Enig and his deputy suffered concussions and were still in the hospital. The bodies of Thurmond and Holmes lay at the county morgue, ironically, alongside Brooke Hart. They remained there, together in death, until late that morning when the Hart family had Brooke removed to a funeral home. In the meantime, telegrams of praise poured into San Jose and the governor's office. Congratulations, said one. I am happy in the knowledge that the people of San Jose have expressed their revolt against crooked attorneys and too lenient parole board by killing the fiendish murderers of Brooke Hart. Another said, Congratulations. The grand jury should meet and adjourn. Case closed. A telegram from Kansas City. Grand killers at the county morgue, ironically, alongside Brooke Hart. They remained there, together in death, until late that morning when the Hart family had Brooke removed to a funeral home. In the meantime, telegrams of praise poured into San Jose and the governor's office. Congratulations, said one. I am happy in the knowledge that the people of San Jose have expressed their revolt against crooked attorneys and too lenient parole board by killing the fiendish murderers of Brooke Hart. Another said, Congratulations. The grand jury should meet and adjourn. Case closed. A telegram from Kansas City said, Lynching is a sincere demand for law enforcement. I congratulate the people of California for their noble example in dealing with criminals. The chief of the State Bureau of Investigation said to the press, It is to be regretted but necessary that the people took the law into their own hands, but they serve notice on gangsters that there is no place for them in California. But nowhere was the support for vigilante justice more blatant and more enthusiastic than in the governor's office. The day after the lynching, Governor James Rolfe expressed his approval of the double murder at St. James Park. If anyone is arrested for this good job, I'll pardon them all. The aroused people of that fine city of San Jose were so enraged. It was only natural that, peaceful and law-abiding as they are, they should rise and offer swift justice to these 2 murderers and kidnappers. Rolfe said that he would like to release all the kidnappers and murderers in San Quentin and Folsom prisons and deliver them to the patriotic San Jose citizens who know how to handle such a situation. On November 28th, the Chronicle reported that Governor Rolfe had actually inquired at San Quentin to ask how many kidnappers were currently being held inside the prison. In the months after the murders of Harold Thurmond and Jack Holmes, accusations of who was responsible for the violence at St. James Park flew back and forth. Some people wanted to blame the sheriff's office for not taking adequate precautions against the mob, when he knew that there was a strong possibility of violence. Sheriff Emig denied it, and the coroner's inquest agreed. The jury said Sheriff Emig used his best judgment in handling the situation to avoid a lynching of the prisoners. Others wanted to blame the Department of Justice, whose agents were the lead investigators on the case. But ever since November 27th, the FBI was careful to point out that at the time of the siege, the prisoners were in the state's custody. In an official Department of Justice synopsis of the case, which is dated February 27, 1934, reports emphasize the responsibility rests with the state of California. It is to be noted that at the time this lynching occurred, both Holmes and Thurmond were completely in the custody of state officials. Eventually, 7 men, including Anthony Cataldi, were arrested on various charges connected to the killings. District Attorney Earl Warren, later to become Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, led the effort to prosecute the suspects. In the months after Governor Rolfe professed his support for mob violence, he received strong criticisms from many different fronts. He was frequently called Governor Lynch, and newspapers across the nation vilified his comments on the murders. The National War Veterans expelled him from their executive board, and numerous public officials called for his impeachment. However, Governor Rolfe was never able to make good on his promise to pardon the lynchers. In June 1934, barely 8 months after the killings, Rolfe died in Santa Clara County of a heart attack, the result, some said, of the stress brought on by the San Jose case. The repercussions of San Jose justice extended overseas as well, but perhaps none were so telling as comments made by the Nazi Party, who in 1933 was just beginning their satanic rise to power in Germany. In their national magazine, published in 1934, the Nazis published photographs of the lynchings in St. James Park and used the killings made by extended on by the San Jose case, barely 8 months after the lynchers. In June 1934, barely 8 months after the killings, Rolfe died by the San Jose case. The repercussions of San Jose justice extended overseas as well, but perhaps none were so telling as comments made by the Nazi Party, who in 1933 was just beginning their satanic rise to power in Germany. In their national magazine, was just beginning their satanic rise to power in Germany. In their national magazine, published in 1934, the Nazis published photographs of the lynchings in St. James Park and used the killings as examples of the decadence of American life. In 1936, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer released Fury, starring Spencer Tracy, Sylvia Sidney, and Walter Brennan. Written and directed by Fritz Lang, who had barely escaped with his life from Nazi Germany, the script was based on the terrible events at San Jose 3 years earlier. Its harrowing depiction of lynch mobs was unforgettable and strongly reminiscent of those at St. James Park. The comparison did not escape the notice of American audiences. The film received an Oscar nomination for Best Story. Though many thousands witnessed the events of November 26, 1933 in San Jose, no one was ever convicted of any crime related to the lynchings of Thurmond and Holmes.
struck down with bullets. This is not me trying to be disrespectful, this is just me bringing you something from 4chan, whether you believe that or not, or, take it with a grain of salt. These aren't my views, I'm just, bringing entertainment. Alright, let's go. Was there any paranormal elements of Columbine? Clive was reported to have asked one of the girls who he killed if she believed in God. When she said yes, he shot her. So yes, there was very likely some paranormal or spiritual aspect to their psyche and their actions. Another theory is that the gunmen were looking for the 911 caller who recited the Lord's Prayer while on the phone and described fleeing from a gunman firing into the double glass doors outside the library on the upper level of the school. This was art teacher Patty Nielsen, who at 35 looked and sounded very young and was often mistaken for a student, and when seeing one of the gunmen, described in early media coverage as a man firing at her and male student Brian Anderson through an outer door as the shooting started. Her description did not initially appear to fit Harris and Claiborne, e.g., I thought he was small, but I found out later he was pretty tall. Interestingly, several others mentioned a gunman who was notably shorter than the two shooters. She described a lone assailant when Harris and Klebold were together for almost the entirety of the attack, and as early coverage notes, the attack started outside the lower level of the school, while Nielsen appeared to be describing an attack at the upper level at roughly the same time. The student with Nielsen, Brian Anderson, was, by his own account, wearing a white hat, and of course, E and D explicitly targeted boys wearing white hats. The logic is that the gunmen were communicating with headsets, walkie-talkies, transceivers, etc., and were instructed by this third assailant to target male students in white caps, and a female student who believed in God, in an attempt to eliminate these witnesses. It's interesting to note that there isn't a single report of asking male students whether they believed in God, yet it was reported that several of the girls were. Of course, this theory would imply that not only were the gunmen communicating with each other, but had access to school and or law enforcement phone systems. Eric Harris was MK Ultra'd. There were multiple shooters who were CIA, but they were left out of official reports. According to a profile by the Scripps Howard News Service, published 4/27/1999, his father was a career USAF officer, working on classified weapons research. Wayne N. Harris had the brains and leadership ability that the Air Force put to use in some of its most important programs, including development of the B-1B bomber and its newest electronic warfare aircraft, now in use over Kosovo. Harris was more of a technical expert in the officer corps than one of its swaggering fighter pilots. But when the Air Force was looking to develop new planes, it called on him. Records provided by the National Personal Records Center on Monday said Harris was 24 when he entered the Air Force in Denver as an enlisted man in 1973. Only 3.5 months later, after finishing work on a bachelor's degree, he was given his officer's commission and sent into pilot's training. Harris flew refueling tankers out of Fairchild, Wash, but quickly climbed the Air Force ladder to instructor and check pilot positions. 9 years into his career, he became a research and test pilot in programs to develop and modify Air Force planes. In 1985, he was tagged to work at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio on the EC-18, the Air Force's latest electronic warfare plane. Harris was also placed in charge of the Technical Orders section during development of weapon systems for the B-1B bomber. The Air Force awarded Harris its Meritorious Service Medal for his work on the two planes. Harris then moved to the Strategic Air Command in 1989, where he piloted tankers out of Woodsmith and became a flight instructor and trainer. He retired in 1996 and moved to Littleton. Harris took a job with the Flight Safety Service Corps, which has contracts with the Defense Department for several programs that include computer-driven electronic flight simulations. It's worth noting here that John Quinn, an independent journalist who interviewed several people involved with the case, claimed that he'd spoke to someone who worked at Plattsburgh Air Force Base and said that Eric was among a number of children living on the base who were subjects in a government mind control program. 17 years later, Dylan Klebold's mother reveals an early local rumor which potentially lends credence to Quinn's reportage. We'd heard a rumor that military training materials on brainwashing techniques had been found in Eric Harris's home, which had refueled our belief that Dylan had been another victim of the tragedy. It was plausible. Eric's father did have a military background. Wayne Harris was assigned to the Strategic Air Command not long before his official retirement. Strategic Air Command facilities are a prominent feature in the background of the Franklin scandal, the son of Sam Colt and the Golden State Killer, the latter having connections to a scandal involving illegal arms traffic involving base personnel, with one state's witness, another enlisted man, transferred out for fear of his safety. Additionally, in the police reports on the alleged Ted Bundy victim, occultist Donna Gail Manson, there is mention of her possessing the phone number for Fairchild AFB, yet another SIC installation. Manson was described as having an obsession with the occult, and investigators found material from an institute for ESP research. Put simply, SAC facilities seemed to follow choreographed terrorism and mind-controlled projects. There certainly were deeper forces at work, including evidence of a satanic element. Why did 100 plus witnesses report seeing more than 2 gunmen or assailants, including an adult, who did not resemble Harris nor Klebold? Why was no action taken when 40 plus witnesses identified the other assailants by name? Why were these other assailants associates of the suspects who had histories of violence, support for Satanism and Nazism, hatred of the school and students, and sketchy alibis be cleared so quickly? Police found at least 99 homemade bombs, 75 plus of them in and around the school, including, in order to early media coverage, in at least 3 cars. How could 2 teenagers have transported and positioned all of these devices? Why do witnesses identify others, not Harris and Klebold, as carrying duffel bags into the school? Sheriff John Stone said, "I've never thought it was just 2 suspects, because of the amount of stuff that was brought in, but we don't have enough to charge anyone." Dave Thomas, there is some belief that there may be other people who are knowledgeable about this. There are an awful lot of devices, and this took a lot of time. Following a tour of the school, Governor Bill Owens told Channel 9 News, "The officers in there are convinced there had to be more people involved. There's just too much stuff in there." Why did at least 35 witnesses report hearing gunfire or explosions after 12 p.m. when Harris and Klebold were alleged to have taken their own lives? This includes teacher Patty Nielsen, who heard gunfire and checked her watch. It was 1:30 p.m. According to the Denver Post, by 3:45 p.m., shots still rang out inside the school. Why did so many witnesses recall hearing gunfire and explosions simultaneously or near simultaneously in different parts of the building when the suspects were officially together for almost the entirety of the attack? Why does the final report of the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office indicate that the suspects never went to science rooms 1 and 8 when numerous shell casings were discovered in this area? Is it a coincidence that witness statements for dozens of students in the science area were and remain inexplicably missing from the tens of thousands of pages of law enforcement files, or that several witnesses indicated the presence of an adult male with a sawed-off shotgun? Eyewitness Jennifer Thompson recently reaffirming her account and stating that a man had a military shape and build, indicating she thought he was police until she saw the sawed-off shotgun. Why does the final report of the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office include no mention of one suspect's brief exit on the east side of the school, as reported by multiple witnesses. If the suspect on the roof was in fact an innocent repairman, why did witnesses see him aiming a weapon? Were shell casings found on the roof, as some said? Did a film showing people on the roof, provided to law enforcement, exist as several witnesses and a report from Colorado State Patrol suggest? Was a tape of the suspects on the roof thrown in the trash, as Donna Taylor, mother of wounded student Mark Taylor, suggests, noting that she had once had a copy before it disappeared from her home? Why do police maintain that Harris and Klebold set the diversionary bombs at South Wadsworth when they've never produced any physical evidence or witnesses to support this? Why have they ignored witnesses who identified another suspect, an associate of the trench coat mafia who had a history of threats, boasted about owning weapons, and reportedly cast hexes on school faculty, as flaying one of the bombs? As with other trenchcoat mafia suspects, this suspect's alibi was highly problematic. Why did police announce the shotguns recovered had no serial numbers, when their serial numbers appear in the police files? Were 4 shotguns found, 2 with serial numbers and 2 without? Why didn't police investigate where the high point 9mm rifle and the pump action shotgun used in the attack came from? Why were none of Harris and Klebold's fingerprints found on all but 2 of the items seized by the police? Whose fingerprints, if any, were on the weapons? Why would 2 students who, contrary to popular myth, were not loners, do not appear to have been sociopaths or psychopaths, and did not hate everyone, commit a suicide attack on their high school only weeks before graduation? Why did Harris and Klebold continue to hand in assignments, study for tests, and select colleges? Why did Harris make plans with his friends in New York for that summer, in the photo of their suicides? Why and how are the guns under Harris and Klebold's legs? Officially, their bodies were turned over, providing a possible explanation for this. However, a close examination of the photos shows that ejecta from the gunshot to Klebold's head splattered Harris's leg, suggesting they were in roughly these positions when they were shot. Another anomaly is presented by the position of Klebold's Tech-9 in his right hand, even though he was reportedly left-handed, and even though his wound was in the left temple, making this seemingly inexplicable and giving rise to the theory that Harris murdered Klebold than himself. But based on the position of the bodies with these other anomalies, doesn't it appear more likely that both Harris and Klebold were murdered? Why was an affidavit that was drafted to search Harris's home for explosives in March 1998 never filed? Why do 20-plus state officials meet several days after the massacre and conclude they would suppress this, destroy the originals, and hide this until it emerged in September 2001, an auspicious time for bad press? Why did the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office destroy the basement tapes? Why are multiple witness statements missing? At least hundreds of pertinent files relevant to the attack still not released. Thousands of crime scene photos not released. Gunshot residue tests for Harris, Klebold, and other suspects not released. Evidence from other suspects' computers not released. The school district's internal report, including disciplinary records of the trenchcoat mafia members, not released, and footage from surveillance cameras in other parts of the school, e.g. the administration area, where there was considerable damage, but no deaths or injuries, along with sightings of suspects other than Harris or Klebold, not released. Why does local media refuse to release their footage from the first half hour of the attack? Why have some former students indicate that they were blown off or even intimidated by the police? Why do so many student families believe they were targeted and harassed after the attack? Strange calls, phones tapped, mail opened. Why did police refuse to enter the building, with the exception of special SWAT and FBI units, or allow emergency services to save victims for hours? Why wasn't School Resource Officer Neil Gardner present when the shooting started? Why was a sniper who had a clear shot on one of the armed suspects ordered not to fire? Why were the ATF, FBI, and US Army present? Who was the two-star general visible on tape, and what function did he serve? Why was the memorial, days later, lined with military trucks? Why were law enforcement personnel, including a sheriff from Jefferson County, at Columbine High School earlier that morning? Why did FEMA conduct a 4-day disaster drill in 1997 designed specifically to address the needs of Jefferson County, in which future Sheriff John Stone and a number of county officials participated? Who scheduled the crisis drills conducted at Columbine High School in the weeks before the shooting? Was there, as one teacher said, a fire drill expected that morning? Were school administrators warned as rumored? Did a student notice a bomb in one of the trash cans on April 19th, as one police report suggests? Were bomb threats phoned into the school and or police on the morning of April 20th, as indicated by media coverage? In office. If so, evacuated. Is it 100 school administrators entitled Crisis Response. Prepare for the unthinkable. It could happen to you on April 19th. Is it also a coincidence that the main presenters at this workshop were the Jefferson designed to investigate the attack, headed or co-headed by an FBI agent? The one exception headed by a former FBI agent. Is it a coincidence that Dwayne Fusilier, the FBI psychologist heading the investigation of the Columbine High School attack, and notably a key figure at the Waco siege, reportedly the last person to speak to Koresh before the Branch Davidian compound was set ablaze, had two sons who attended Columbine, Brian Fusilier, who witnessed the attack in the cafeteria, and Scott Fusilier, a recent graduate who had produced a video in 1997 with members and associates of the Trenchcoat Mafia, depicting trench-coated gunmen shooting through the halls of the school. Why didn't Dwayne Fusilier excuse himself from the case? Why was the U.S. Attorney's Office consulted on prosecutive decisions in this local case? Why didn't the Governor's Office give Justice Erickson of the Columbine Review Commission subpoena power? How could the Columbine Review Commission conduct a meaningful investigation without subpoena power? Why did investigators show a remarkable lack of curiosity about connections with numerous similar school violence-related incidents occurring around the same time in the metro Denver area and around the country? Is it a coincidence that Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Promised Land both aired episodes that week depicting plans to commit shootings at high schools, the latter set in Denver? Is it similarly a coincidence that The Matrix, featuring black-clad anti-heroes in trench coats, was released in March? Is it a coincidence MTV scheduled warning signs about youth violence for April 22nd? It had been scheduled before. And the History Channel had scheduled Slaughter in Schools for May 2nd. My source for these statements are 30,000 plus pages of documents released by the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office, Arapahoe County Sheriff's Office, El Paso County Sheriff's Office, the FBI, and other government agencies. Many of them are available here. Now, let's talk about the eyewitness accounts, which strongly suggest others were involved with the attacks. There are well over 100 statements to this effect from scores of witnesses. Jake Apodaca, sophomore, at soccer field and heard what sounded like firecrackers. Saw 3 subjects near school, shooting. One threw bombs onto the roof of the school. Subjects shot shotgun toward him and his friend. He and his friend ran to a house and called 911. He saw a gunman duck down with a shotgun in Weaver Park. Subjects were WM, 2 wearing black trench coats, black berets, black pants, black army boots, black t-shirts, carrying shotguns. He has seen them at school before, but did not find them in the yearbook he was shown. The third subject had light brown hair, wearing a white t-shirt and jeans, throwing bombs onto the roof. Saw one explode. Apodaca had seen him at school before. Notably, just before 3 men, it appears the original number was penciled out. On the next page were several names: Bowles, Thaddeus, Perry, Robert, Sergeant, Brian, Stair, Joseph. As noted by Apodaca, all were members of the Trenchcoat Mafia, though Perry and Stair were no longer enrolled, the latter graduating in 1998, while Perry had dropped out the year before that. Nevertheless, there were eyewitnesses who placed them on campus that day. Apodaca indicates none of them were the gunmen he saw. Apodaca, who also relayed his account on television the day of the attacks, appears to have given a more detailed account of the day to the FBI on April 28, 1999. However, according to the FBI report, his story has changed drastically. The second black-clad assailant now disappears from the narrative, leaving 2 assailants. Apodaca is a sophomore at Columbine High School. On April 20th, 1999, at 11:10 a.m., which is the end of the 4th period, he went to the cafeteria to meet his friends, Chris Wisher, Josh Chavez, and John, last name unknown, just prior to the 11:54 bell. While sitting at a table near the south window in the cafeteria, he saw Dylan Klebold walk into the cafeteria through the southwest entrance. He was dressed in all black boots, black trousers, black shirt, a black trench coat, and he was wearing a Blackwoods hat with a Boston Red Sox emblem. He knew Klebold only by sight, and indicated that during lunch, he normally sat in his BMW in the parking lot on the south side of the cafeteria. Apodaca and his friends walked out of the southwest exit of the cafeteria towards the soccer field. He heard what sounded like a string of firecrackers going off, and turned towards the school and saw 2 white males crouching along the northwest corner of the cafeteria. One person was dressed in a white, short-sleeved t-shirt and blue jeans, with no weapon visible. The other was dressed in all black trousers, black shirt, black trench coat, a black beret, and was wearing what appeared to be a black mask. He did not recognize either of these individuals, since one had on a mask, and the person in the white t-shirt because he was crouched down with his back to him. The new account presents additional problems with the official version. Harris had black pants, not blue jeans. Harris did have a gun. Harris is not supposed to have removed his trench coat this early into the shooting, and, most importantly, no masks or berets were found, yet more than one witness described assailants who were wearing them. Apodaca saw the person in the white t-shirt throw an object about the size of a soda can on top of the library. This object appeared metallic, since it looked silver in the sunlight. 1 or 2 seconds after landing on the roof, it exploded with a loud boom, a flash of fire and a puff of smoke. He then threw a second object on the roof, which also exploded. After the second device exploded, the person dressed in the black trench coat walked west from the northwest side of the cafeteria and shot at 3 students near the southwest corner of the cafeteria with what he believes was a shotgun. After shooting at these 3 people, the shooter fired 4 or 5 times at Apodaca and his friends, who were about 40 to 50 yards away. They fell to the ground, and after the shooter entered the school through the southwest cafeteria entrance, they got up and ran to a nearby house on Taylor Court. Apodaca knew who Eric Harris was, but never talked with him. He knows 2 other members of the Trenchcoat Mafia, Joe Stair, who graduated from Columbine High School last year, and Chris Morris. During lunch, Morris usually sits by himself at a table on the south side of the cafeteria, but he cannot recall if he saw him there on April 20th, 1999. According to Apodaca, phrase of the day over the school television system each day at the end of second period. He recalls the phrase of the day on April 20th, 1999, which was broadcast on televisions in each classroom, appear to be written in German. He later heard from other friends this phrase of the day was transmitted by Trenchcoat Mafia members in the audio-visual class, and was translated to mean, "Today is the day you wish you weren't here." Other witnesses confirmed that suspect had blue jeans, that he did not appear to have a gun, and that he was throwing explosive devices onto the roof of the school. This clearly was not Harris. Also note how the gunman crouching in Weaver Park disappears from his statement to the FBI. Based on his early interview, there was a fourth assailant, distinct from the two black-clad suspects, an unidentified suspect in a white t-shirt and blue jeans. So, 8 days after his interview with the Littleton PD on April 20th, and his televised interview in which he confirms 3 assailants outside the school, 2 suspects have disappeared from his account. But for the official version to be correct, Apodaca would still have to be mistaken and have really seen 2 suspects dressed in all black, and neither with masks. And since he knew Harris and Klebold by sight, he should have recognized them. But he told the FBI he did not. William Arapkiles, freshman. William Arapkiles related that about 5 minutes after he began playing soccer, he heard what sounded like fireworks going off in the area of the cafeteria. Billy said he and the others on the field began to cheer and shout, thinking it was a prank. He said that he looked toward the school and observed 3 people near the west entrance to the north main hall. Billy stated that 2 of the subjects were wearing trench coats, and the third was wearing a white t-shirt. According to Billy, the 2 subjects wearing trench coats had guns. He did not see the subject with the white shirt with a firearm. Billy related that the subject wearing the white shirt was pacing back and forth and was about 5 feet away from the 2 in trench coats. Billy did not think that the subject wearing the white shirt was a victim, but was with the other 2. Billy reported that he was too far away to recognize the subjects. Arapkiles is a major problem for Harris's white shirt bomber. He saw all 3 together, as did others. Before leaving Jake Apodaca, it's worth noting this interesting detail which emerged in his April 28, 1999 interview with the FBI. According to Apodaca, the audiovisual class transmits a phrase of the day over the school television system each day at the end of the second period. He recalls the phrase of the day on April 20th, 1999, which was broadcast on televisions in each classroom, appeared to be written in German. He later heard from other friends this phrase of the day was transmitted by Trenchcoat Mafia members in the audiovisual class and was translated to mean, "Today is the day you wish you weren't here." This and other variations of the ominous phrase of the day were described by scores of students, and as Apodaca suggests, the suspicion was that this had been planned by the Trenchcoat Mafia. During second period, Tuesday morning at Columbine High School, the daily list of school announcements was telecast to every classroom from the video center. At the end of the announcements came the phrase of the day, often an irreverent, team commentary meant to provoke a thought or a laugh. On Tuesday, recalls Columbine sophomore Patrick Symington, the phrase on the screen, accompanied by the music of a German techno-pop group, was, "I bet you will see me free today. 420, 420, 420. These obviously were very prepared for Tuesday's assault and gave clues, says Symington, 16, who was convinced the eerie classroom message was no coincidence. As it turned out, the Trenchcoat Mafia and their associates did have direct control of the phrase of the day, and the one who said it on April 20th, 1999 was Eric Weich, a close associate of Harris and Klebold, who was later arrested in October 1999 in connection with an alleged plot against the school, reportedly talking about finishing the job. On May 11th, 1999, Weich was investigated but not arrested for allegedly discussing plans to blow up Chatfield High School. According to Pat McDuffie, who was part of the Trenchcoat Mafia at Columbine, who was a branch of the Trenchcoat Mafia at Chatfield, Dakota Ridge student Brianna Cass overheard classmate Jordan Spavin telling others that she knows everyone involved at Columbine. She went on to say, "This is definitely not over. Every 13 days, they will hit another school. Chatfield is next, then Dakota Ridge." Lauren Waterbury, a student at Columbine, told investigators that while at a lacrosse meeting with Chatfield students, She noticed backpacks with CHS 420, CHS 13th Day, and Chatfield TCM. Vike played the bullying victim in Harris and Klebold's infamous video, Hitman for Hire, reportedly inspired by the Trenchcoat Mafia, and he participated in other video productions with them, often appearing in this context when the home videos are played in documentaries, with Vike's face blurred. Another acquaintance, 16-year-old Eric Vike, said he helped Harris and Klebold make several videos, all with the same dark theme. They always wore trench coats. They always wanted to be the intimidators. The good guys out to get the bad guys, Vike said. The student, who said he turned over several copies of the tapes to investigators, said the videos contained a hidden warning. If you watched it closely, there could be subtle hints that something could happen, he said. Vike insisted that the phrase of the day was only inspired by the nice weather on April 20th, 1999. The government files do not support this and suggest that the meaning was related to the attack. Here it is. ABC's 2020 did a special in 1990 on deaf education. They featured Columbine High School. The courses included assignments such as writing final letters to loved ones, writing your own suicide note and obituary, field trips to the morgue where students viewed and touched dead bodies. They interview Columbine student Tara Becker, who described how she had become obsessed with suicide as a result of the course and its unorthodox spiritual orientation. ABC. 6 years ago, Tara was a junior at Columbine High in Littleton, Colorado. Her English literature teacher began weaving her own beliefs on reincarnation into the classroom discussions of death. Tara. This is what the teacher was teaching us. When you die, you get all of the knowledge that God has, and then you're recreated. You come back again in another life form, and you have all the knowledge that God knows. We talked about how we wanted to look in our casket. The things that we learned in class taught us how to be brave enough to face death. Tara details how she made plans to take her own life, and says one girl in her class tried to do the same thing 4 times in 1 week. ABC. Was death taught to you as being something terrible? Something to dread? Tara. Oh, no. It was exciting. It was something to look forward to. Tara Becker was interviewed again in the documentary American Tragedy, produced by the right-wing Eagle Forum, describing how one class project was called Masquerade, a magazine journal that was full of subliminal messages and images, how teacher John Newman, phonetic, was overly sexual, with female students claimed to have psychic powers, etc. She also described how the class had suicide talk days, in which students were encouraged to talk about how they'd take their own lives, and how she had written an assignment in which she produced her own note and obituary. It's been speculated in some quarters that these deaf courses may have provided a mechanism for leading Harris and Klebold to produce some of the later material used as evidence in the official version, e.g. Eric Harris's diary, the basement tapes, etc. It may also account for yet another strange facet of the case. A number of the victims had allegedly made statements foreshadowing their own deaths, most notably Rachel Scott, whose diary indicated that she was going to die soon, struck down with bullets. Either way, it is evidence that something very strange was brewing at Columbine High School. In another strange turn, the aforementioned Chatfield High School, where survivors of Columbine were sent to finish the 1999 school year, allowed U.S. intelligence contractor SciTech to offer classes in remote viewing after the massacre. A number of trenchcoat mafia members would be left out, quietly asked not to return. Even still, several, including Brian Sargent, who was positively identified to investigators as one of the gunmen by eyewitness Kara Sender, were allowed to, with student Chris Wisher, whose account we will discuss next, reportedly telling journalist John Quinn that many Columbine students, including himself, will not return to school, because some of the murderers are right there attending school. CNN, December 6, 2001, Littleton, Colorado. One of the two teenage gunmen who killed 12 of her students and the teacher before taking their own life in a 1999 attack on Columbine High School described their plan in detail in his journals and said that if they could not get out of the country after the attack, they would hijack a plane and crash it into New York City. Eric Harris, 18, outlined his plans a year before he and 17-year-old Dylan Klebold carried out the April 1999 attack. The entries quoted are here verbatim, including numerous misspellings, although obscenities have been edited. If by some weird as shit luck, Mai and V survive and escape, we will move to some island somewhere, or maybe Mexico, New Zealand, or some exotic place where the Americans can't get us. If there isn't such a place, then we will hijack a hell of a lot of bombs and crash a plane into NYC, with us inside firing away as we go down, Harris wrote. Interestingly, Harris's father was an Air Force officer involved with top secret, classified aerospace weapons, with research going back decades. He was employed at Flight Safety International, a company with a close relationship to the Defense Department, which operated flight simulation courses, which reportedly trained one or more of the alleged hijackers. A flight school operated by Flight Safety was subject to an FBI investigation soon after 9/11, allegedly a hotbed for training Middle Eastern pilots. Was this line in Harris's diary a wink from the programmers? Or was the idea of flying planes into buildings foreshadowed in the programming instilled by CIA controllers in the decades before 9/11? What goes on in DUMBs? Give me all the info on underground bases that you got. AI development, world surveillance, underwater construction, human cloning, animal cloning, splicing/chimera experiments, portal experiments, highest level classified science experiments, high level neuro-linguistic programming, robotics testing, kidnapping, trafficking, mining, paranormal experiments, world leader meetings, rituals, black masses, altars, high-level executions and assassinations, currency storage, stored history records, blood drinking, adrenochrome storage facilities. These underground military facilities are used for trauma-based mind control / monic programming, genetic and other human experimentation, military/NWO technology development and storage, including advanced anti-gravity crafts, child/human trafficking, assault, torture, breeding programs, and other fucked up things. Some quotes. Much of this Black Ops drug money is being used to fund projects classified above top secret. These projects include the building and maintaining of deep-level underground bases, such as the Chrysanthemum underground biogenetics facility in Dulce, New Mexico, Pine Gap in Australia, Brecon Beacons in Wales, Snowy Mountains in Australia, the Nyala Range in Africa, west of Kindu in Africa, next to the Libyan border in Egypt, Mount Blanc in Switzerland, Narvik in Scandinavia, Gotland Island in Sweden. There are at least 1,400 of these DUMBs worldwide, 131 in the US, with 2 underground bases being built per year in the US at the moment. The average depth of these bases are 4.25 miles underground, some shallower and some deeper. The bases are on average the size of a medium-sized city. Each DUMB costs between $17 and $26 billion to build, which is funded by MI6, CIA drug money. A nuclear-powered drill is used to dig underground. The drill goes through rock at a tremendous rate and literally melts the rock away to form a smooth glass-like surface around the edges of the tunnels. Project Mannequin was started in 1972 and is still being run from a 6th-level underground facility beneath the small town of Peasmore in Berkshire, a few miles from where I grew up. Also, the CLC-1 base under Westminster in London, and connected to the large base under Parliament, the Monsoon 1 facility, under RAF Lakenheath, 90 miles north of London, and the underground facility below the Porton Down biowarfare facility in Wiltshire. This underground base is so secret that the local residents of Peasmore are not even aware it exists. This NSA facility, known in intelligence circles as the AL-499 base, is located 200 feet below the village. There are entrances to the facility at Greenham Common, known as Bravo Entrance, which is now sealed off, Watchfield Military Science College, Delta Entrance, Harwell Laboratories in Oxfordshire. There are entrances to the base in Lambourn and Welford in Berkshire. The underground base at Lambourn is the Area 51 of the UK, with many exotic anti-gravity aircraft stored there. The people running the AL-499 facility in Berkshire and the connected underground bases are a hard-line military regime that is ultimately a religious cult centered around the corrupt Zionists and Rosicrucians. These places are religious centers where so-called black magic rites are performed, ancient deities worshipped, and children trained and sacrificed. One of the largest research centers for experimental programming is on the west coast of the United States. A large research facility is underground and is combined with sophisticated military laboratory research. Another is in East Berlin, and another is in Prague in Europe, and yet another one exists in Rome. A large underground facility located in Czechoslovakia. This facility has numerous altars within it, where sacrifices are done continuously, day and night, for the spiritual empowerment of the project. The facility is equipped with high-tech equipment. Mornington Crescent, that London Underground tube station, which has been closed since whenever, contains the entrances to British intelligence's tunnels to Illuminati HQ. This is where they all go to perform their satanic rites, not just old World War II secret bunkers. There is also a tunnel under the Thames from MI6 to the Houses of Parliament, a whole underground network that not too many people know about. Underneath the Royal Observatory upon Greenwich Hill, there is a large military base, accessible by a trapdoor within the observatory, or the Queen Anne's colonnaded house, next door to Queen Anne's Garden. People have been abducted, tortured, and murdered down there for many decades now, and upon Prince Philip's orders. Not to mention the child sacrifice that goes on down there. The underground city below Area 51 is called Zion, or Mars, and it has a mirror underground city, also named Zion, located in Israel. Valhalla is in northwestern Kansas, underneath Gove County. My training was completed in the USA at age 14 years old by Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino in a special laboratory established at Dulce Underground Base. Delta training included the weaponization of psychic ability or psychic warfare training. Hidden high atop the mountainside along Going to the Sun Road at more than 6,600 is the secret tunnel entrance to an extensive underground Nazi/CIA facility. In the above satellite image, the larger circle denotes the hidden rock facade entrance, and the smaller circle denotes the position of camouflage guards. The secret tunnel descends more than 2 miles to a giant hollowed-out industrial complex below the mountain. This huge underground city/base connects Montana to Canada, just north of the national border at the cleverly named International Peace Park. This underground base is where the CIA keeps its stolen Holocaust trillions and tests its most secret New World Order black projects, including Tesla's flying disc, optically invisible aircraft, and other stolen Tesla technologies. Operations at the base include maintenance and deployment of stealth drones. Glacier National Park was the first national park to have railroad access at the time, a necessity for all large-scale military-industrial construction. This enabled them to transport the rumored Nazi gold train of stolen Holocaust loot from Montauk, NY, to the secret base located inside the mountain. On the promontory above the secret tunnel entrance, there is a strange-looking outcropping of rocks that at certain times of the day looks like a grizzly bear, hence the name Grizzly Peak. The CIA uses this secret tunnel to illegally smuggle drugs, guns, SS Nazi war criminals, and dignitaries into Canada without stopping at any border crossings. The secret tunnel to the underground base is hidden behind a remote-controlled, movable rock wall located in the side of the mountain on Going to the Sun Road, shown in this photograph, just north of Grizzly Peak and the Weeping Wall. In the far background, the Garden Wall can be seen, and at far right is the base of Haystack Butte. The tunnel entrance was cut out of the bedrock by precision laser to prevent any possible discovery. When the base is active during the summer months, there are armed and camouflaged guards hiding on the mountainside, surrounding the secret tunnel entrance. The Nazi New World Order keeps its stolen Holocaust trillions and stolen Tesla technology secretly hidden inside this hollowed-out mountain facility, providing access only to the New World Order elite. The CIA Nazis use stolen Tesla technology to create artificial anti-gravity fields around Glacier National Park, the nearby Blackfoot Indian Reservation, and many other locations throughout the world. There are hundreds of satellites orbiting the Earth that project high-intensity, positively charged laser beams to certain areas on the Earth. The New World Order Nazis use these beams not only as weapons, but also to transmit power to levitating aircraft, flying discs, and other various stolen Tesla technologies below. The absorptive properties of the levitating aircraft allow their utilization of energy beamed from orbital plasma generators, optimally transmitted when the stealth aircraft are themselves plasma cloaked for optical and radar invisibility, giving off only infrared light. A hazardous byproduct of these space laser beams is radon gas. Radon is said to be an invisible gas that causes cancer and leukemia in humans and animals. But if you ask the US government about radon gas, you will not get a straight answer. Native Americans on the nearby Blackfoot Reservation have suffered from extremely high rates of cancer and leukemia since the 1950s. The US government says that nothing is wrong and there is no reason to be concerned, yet suffering communities must be informed of the true cause of their severe ailments. The SR-71 Blackbird, B-2 stealth bomber planes, and anti-gravity flying discs are constantly hovering just below 200 in the skies above Glacier National Park and the Blackfoot Indian Reservation. This explains why commercial flights are forbidden to fly below that in Glacier National Park, and why no one is allowed to bring firearms into the park for protection against the aggressions of the resident grizzly bears. There are many more secret CIA bases at other national parks around the country, including the Grand Canyon. These planes are optically invisible and make no audible sound at all. The SR-71 et al. Are periodically brought into the secret underground hangars located in the hollowed-out mountain below Grizzly Peak on Going to the Sun Road. These levitating airplanes are slowly lowered into the waters of Lake McDonald in Glacier National Park, seen above. The planes are capable of traveling underwater, like submarines, for short distances. Once the planes are submerged in Lake McDonald, they travel to the underground/underwater hangars inside the hollowed-out mountain. Once inside the underground hangars, the planes are serviced. There is a giant elevator inside the mountain that brings the planes up to a full-sized hidden runway inside the mountain. During the night, when Going to the Sun Road is closed, a large camouflage section of the mountain is briefly opened for aircraft to exit the facility. Once the plane has left the mountain base, the secret runway bay doors are closed. Otto Skorzeny presented the photograph below, taken on August 27, 1997, describing the hidden stealth technologies active around glacier parks like McDonald. Skorzeny pointed out the flat, squared rock as being a hidden flat panel radar array, one feature among several secret installations enabling covert surveillance of the sensitive airspace. The disc-shaped cloud is actually a plasma-cloaked stealth disc aircraft silently hovering above the CIA boat. Photos of cloud-enveloped discs are well known in UFO circles. The US government claims that SR-71 Blackbirds in hangars are wet because they expand and shrink while flying, thereby causing condensation buildup. That line is disinformation. Stealth planes spray mists of water on themselves while flying to create the illusion of optical invisibility by interaction with the electrified aircraft shell. Water vapor is used by stealth planes to disguise the aircraft in a white-colored, artificial cloud that, when ignited, forms a plasma mirage envelope for complete optical cloaking. To use the words of Otto Skorzeny, the stealth planes are like flying ozone generators. This advanced application of HHO plasmas derived from water allows the planes to be lowered through the waters of Lake McDonald or other lakes around the US to secret underwater/underground CIA facilities. The term bloodliner has been applied to psychopathic victims of generational sexual abuse, as in the case of the sheriffs, a designation that may be supported scientifically by a genetic predisposition to psychopathy among males with the YY chromosome, rare exceptions to the predominant XY. Otto Skorzeny exposed a multi-generational human reproduction experiment for the Fourth Reich repopulation of North America with secret subterranean Aryan populations exceeding 20 million. Skorzeny reported himself to be one of the elite inseminators for the vast human reproduction experiment, now in its 6th decade, being conducted at the secret Nazi base in Glacier National Park, Montana, and elsewhere below the bedrock of America. Hitler's entire Nazi Third Reich of 50,000 plus had been living in secret underground bases throughout the United States, Canada, England, France, and Italy ever since the supposed end of World War II. They have been actively planning for their new world order or Fourth Reich in America at these secret underground bases. The initial
several people have had a lot of people suggest this to me, and
he thinks they're either actually extraterrestrial and we just truly cannot see them through sensors, or that they are some kind of natural phenomenon. Most of the higher-ups just frankly do not care about them, except in so far as we can be sure they aren't Chinese. That's why we have one guy on it and not a team. No interest. No idea if the Air Force might know more though, but my guess is no. CIA founded all the military coups in South America? Not all, but many. This isn't even really classified info though. Like, we'll deny it. But it's like when Putin says he didn't try to interfere with 2016. Okay, since no one is asking anything, I would like to explain roughly how the intake process at the CIA works, because it's pretty extreme, and I've never really heard it discussed at length anywhere. So basically, everything will seem like a normal job interview during the first stage, with only a few hints at what will come. Then, in the second stage, they will put you through a thorough psych evaluation and ask general questions about your history and reasons for wanting to join. Simultaneously, they will talk to literally every person you have ever spoken to more than a couple times, acquaintances even. They will take any and every piece of information they get about you and compile it into a dossier which you will never, ever have access to. The third stage is the shortest and most intense. If you get to the third stage, you have basically passed every background check and have been selected to serve. The purpose of the third stage, though, which lasts anywhere from 1 to 16 hours, is to try and psychologically break you. Basically, they bring you into a room, hook you to a lie detector test, and you sit across from a veteran agent who is pretending to be just the lie detector technician. Then, they bombard you with questions about every single bad thing you have ever done that they found out. The absolute most humiliating shit. Stuff you never even told anyone about. They will have found out about it and confront you about it angrily. They will also, and this is crucial to the process, also make up tons of just absolutely false stuff about you and also accuse you of those crimes and yell at you for being a traitor, pervert, whatever. The only way to fail this test is to lie. The lie detector has absolutely nothing to do with determining if you told the truth. The veteran agent can tell much better than the machine, and your heart rate is jumping all over the fucking place during this too. It's actually a horrifying and traumatizing experience. Is Stargate legit? Does the US military still pursue parapsychological technology research? Yes, it was also more successful than is generally known. I believe research is still ongoing, even though they claim that officially it ended in the 90s. Is there some truth about that case that involved the US military finding a cave filled with some of Bigfoot hominid community and they killed every single one of them? I don't know anything about this, sorry. Also, is the USA struggling in some kind of Cold War 2.0 with Russia and China? Just China. Russia isn't actually a threat. Like, they're a threat to Ukraine, but not to the US. China is also kind of not really a threat either, but they could grow into one. Maybe there is a fourth party that is unknown to the public. If that's the case, could you elaborate? Thanks for the info. The fourth party is honestly Turkey, much more threatening than Russia and increasingly hostile. In order of threats to the US interests, I would put it like this. 1. China. 2. Turkey. 3. Russia. Well, in order to keep the peace between the US and the Afghan government, we basically allowed them to do a lot of stuff we probably shouldn't have. Lots of corruption, abuse, sexual and otherwise, etc. Some of which I witnessed firsthand. I guess to some degree, we just accepted that the entire situation was a clusterfuck, and that we just needed to get through it. 0. I don't think China has the operational capacity to invade Taiwan before maybe 2025 at the soonest, and if they tried before then, it would probably be a disaster for them. They simply don't have enough experience with the type of logistics necessary to pull it off yet. The biggest tell that they actually aren't planning to do it right now is that they keep talking about it. It's all posturing as a show for the Chinese public. Then, if and when China tries to invade Taiwan, our main strategy, and the Chinese know this, is going to be to put up the full air-sea battle doctrine, which basically amounts to destroying all offensive military capacity, then destroying all Chinese domestic industrial capacity, and then we will go home. We do not plan to ever even attempt to invade and conquer China. Just beat them into the ground and make sure that they can't get back up for another 40 years. We're only going to do that if we have to. Again, most of us think China will simply collapse in the next 30 to 40 years, unless they do a really large amount of domestic changes. More so than Iran? Iran is actually not only a threat, but it's a strong contender to be a really great ally in the region. Culturally, and even from a strategic perspective, a lot of our goals are aligned. Depends on if work can be done to adequately repair the trust that was built between us during the Obama era. The Iranians still don't trust us, but have the potential to be a much greater ally to the US than even Israel, and certainly much more than the Saudis. The Iranian interests in nukes are almost entirely defensive. They don't want us to invade them, and they think nukes are about the only way to ensure that that will not happen. Agents are aware that they are pawns. This is literally our job. We know it before we get sent anywhere to do anything. But this Rothschild of Illuminati bullshit is just wrong. The military-industrial complex is real, but the methods of influence actual companies use are not as direct as imagined by conspiracy theorists. Agents are pawns for the long-term strategic plans of the US. Arguably, we're pawns for the blob, which is much less inspiring, but also probably a bit more true if we're honest with ourselves. Part of the process of selecting people to serve at the CIA is to select people that truly, honestly believe in the common concept and promise of America. People who are in fact patriotic, but not solely patriotic. We also have to have a morality that is conditionally flexible and lawful. We also need to deeply want to serve. The concept of service towards something greater than yourself is extremely important, and I would say that all of us believe in it. No one at the CIA is a cynic or a nihilist. The process is designed to root these people out because they are dangerous and could flip against the US to other interests. We are all patriots, at least in our conception, but our loyalties are not to people we know, but to the concept of American governance and interests. We are almost exclusively ends-focused, though in recent decades there has been more thought given to the means since we cannot assume complete secrecy of our actions. What's the game plan for when America loses that conflict? So, Taiwan is similar to Vietnam. The communists won in Vietnam, but the end result was a big fat nothing other than locally. If China wins in Taiwan, we will simply fortify the other points of constraint around them, Japan, South Korea, etc. Their war would be just beginning. And to be clear, I'm not saying it's not possible for the Chinese to overcome the US and actually become the leading world power. Just that we have made it very difficult for them, and that I think we have a much better chance of winning than them. The president at the time splinters your agency into a million fucking pieces. Who would do this other than Trump? Hawley? Cruz? They tried to work at the CIA and were rejected. Even if someone did gut the agency, these plans and contingencies won't just disappear. SCP Foundation is the Saudi religious police because fighting witchcraft is one of their roles, and they have made hundreds of arrests to that end. The Saudi royals are probably far more into witchcraft and shit like that than any other entrenched political class in the world. Probably the dumbest elites of any country too. MBS is dangerous because he is both clever and dumb. Like he's good at tactics, but absolutely one of the worst alive at constructing a realistic vision of the types of goals he should be working towards. The man is liable to do anything. He's like a Machiavellian that is more concerned with people seeing how clever he is than actually accomplishing anything. The entrenched death to America sentiment that is going to be a big hurdle. This is all Iranian government propaganda. The people of Iran don't give a shit about America or American power. They, if anything, hate the current Iranian government more than America due to decades of mismanagement. Iranians are extremely cosmopolitan and would gladly turn the state secular if given a chance. Was 9/11 an inside job? No. If we couldn't keep Iran-Contra under wraps, what makes you think we could have kept that a secret? The best movie about the CIA is Sharkie. It got a lot of stuff right. Tech levels are less important to CIA work than NSA. What do you believe the idea of America is? What is American governance in contrast to the rest of the world? So, to paraphrase the Churchill quote about democracy, America is the worst of the global superpowers, except for all the others that have existed. I'm aware that America has flaws, has made mistakes, has done things that even I consider bad. In the end, though, we have been the fairest and least oppressive global hegemon the world has ever seen. No other world power has ever let the seas completely open and mostly safe for everyone from every other country. If the Chinese were to succeed us, they would almost certainly not do the same. The fact of the matter is that the US serves an important role, and that if we and our forces disappeared from the global stage, the world would be returned to 18th and 19th century chaos. Except this time, a lot of countries have nukes, and not all of them are going to be deterred by mutually assured destruction. This is simply not true. In fact, we still have a large amount of legitimacy. China is sort of less popular than ever now. They have immense soft power from trade relations, but they cannot go on being the world's factory forever. Everyone in the Western world, apart from Russia and a few post-Soviets, want the US to remain the preeminent power. We take a lot of stress off of them. Most Asian countries want this too. Better for the power to be held by us than by a hostile neighbor. It's true that once you are out of the CIA, you can still be called back in if they need your specific expertise for some reason. But there is a definite distinction between working for the CIA and having worked for the CIA. The world is a jumble of intentions with millions of political, corporate, and private actors, all working constantly at cross purpose. No one is in control. The world is Hobbesian. The United States is the Leviathan. We are the closest thing to establishing an actual order in world history, and we actually did set up an international system in 1945 that is remarkably more stable than the ones that came before it. That does not mean everything and everybody is controlled. You, and most conspiracy theorists, simply do not understand how power works, and how it is actually exercised. The key to our limited successes is that we enforce minimal, rather than maximal, rule sets. The Illuminati stuff is funniest, like just the thought that there is a secret group of rich, powerful people pulling the strings of society in addition to the normal rich and powerful people in society that we all know about. And the degree of control that people suppose is possible is also hilarious. It's insanely difficult to get assets, even compromised assets, to follow through on things you tell them to do already. The idea that everyone at every level of culture and politics could be controlled in that way is pure fantasy. Like, there are social, political, and economic groups like Skull and Bones, Bohemian Grove, Bilderberg with lots of important, powerful members, but they just aren't secret and don't do very much on their own. Like, Bilderberg is basically the same thing as the World Economic Forum, or Davos, except that it isn't public-facing. What are the contingencies for a large-scale collapse, say in the next 50 years, brought on by climate change and economic crisis? There are none to my knowledge. Painfully little has been done by the US on this front. CIA wouldn't really deal with that though. Are there any plans to expand the two-party system? Maybe people won't believe this, but we don't get involved in domestic affairs. FBI does a lot more domestic stuff than us, but also, the FBI does not and could not control the course of American politics. If I had to guess though, I would not be surprised if the DSA left and the ethno-nationalist right got together at some point, as the opposition to the establishment liberals,